it goes tea rose, winter rose, wild rose. You don't really have to read them in order, particularly the first two, but by the end of those two, you kind of do have to read them to understand this one because they do tie together if you don't necessarily need to know the backstory, because Donnelly loves repetition. I thought Winter Rose was the absolute strongest. By the time that I finished the Winter Rose, I was a little disillusioned about this one because it ends with the main characters of this novel. The problem with all three of these books is that Donnelly does way too much. It's like she has multiple stories within a book, and it's not even multiple plots, like subplots and main plots within a book, but it's kind of like she finishes a story and then she leads into the next book at the end of the previous book. So at the end of the Winter Rose, we have seen Seamus reappear. We know that he is an explorer. He loves climbing. He's terrible at school and he doesn't want to do anything that has to do with graduating. He just wants to be an explorer. So then Willa enters the picture and he's like, wow, wow, wow. He's in love with Willa. They make a climbing bet, which he loses, which means that he has to accompany her to Everest. And that's where we end. And I was disillusioned by them at that point because honestly, they were very annoying at first. And then their trek up the mountain was really, or maybe it was Kilimanjaro. It doesn't matter. It's a big mountain. Everest was involved. Kilimanjaro was involved. Whatever. But it was actually quite interesting, this look at exploration and all the things that were involved with it. But then it got really cheesy and I was just done. And by the time that Willa, she and Seamus are exceptionally selfish. They're hard to relate to. They're hard to connect with because there's nothing there to make them a sympathetic character. I prefer Seamus to Willa. But anyways, so by the time that book ended, I was like, I don't want to read The Wild Rose. But I am type A, I am OCD. I cannot not finish what I started. I said, you know what, Beth? Give The Wild Rose a chance. I should have just not. And on that note, this book, it was like a 20-hour read. Narration wasn't terrible, but while I feel, because I've read many Jennifer Donnelly books, and while I feel like her strength lies in historical fiction, this book was a mess. And it was super boring and it had way too many perspectives. I did read or listen to more of it than I had intended because her chapters would kind of cut in half. And so we'd have the boring stuff and then we'd have the stuff that I really wanted to know about. And I knew that if I skip to the next chapter, I would miss what I really wanted to know about. But on that note, I was listening to this novel around Thanksgiving, and when you know, I was exhausted on Thanksgiving, and so I went and I took a nap, and I was like, I'm gonna play this novel while I go to sleep. I slept for like 3 hours, which was kind of the point, was I wanted to get through the novel without actually having to listen to the novel. And so I picked up like 30 minutes to the end. Then I rewind to a certain place because I was like, I have no idea what's happening here, only for it to end. So let's just say this book has, oh my gosh. First off, this book has 614 pages. And that translates to 122 chapters plus a prologue and an epilogue. So while it has 122 chapters, my audiobook now stopped at chapter 111, or technically 112, because I get to the end of 111 and I'm like, That's it. There's a lot of disappointing parts of this novel, but there's no way that Donnelly was going to leave me hanging, considering this was the finale of the trivia. Considering this is the finale of the trilogy. So it ends with, at this point, Willa has thought that Seamus is dead. She has drowned her sorrows in opium, which started with the loss of her leg. And she has gone to Paris, and she's this famous photographer, which one of my biggest issues, I have so many issues with Willa, is that she can do no wrong. She's amazing at everything she does. She's an amazing lover. She's an amazing explorer. She's an amazing photographer. She fears no danger. So she's in Paris and she's taking pictures that nobody could have ever taken of people nobody could have imagined taking pictures of. But because her family is afraid for her because she's going to kill herself on opium and she doesn't eat, her aunt comes to take her home to London. And we end with Willa kissed her aunt again, then she grabbed her coat, got down the stairs from her flat to the street as fast as she could, forgetting her scarf, forgetting her hat, forgetting everything but the amazing, impossible news that Seamus Finnegan was alive. And I was like, you cannot tell me that's where this novel ends. We have so many loose ends and you cannot tell me that is it. So that is when I came and I picked up this chunky monkey book and I read the last 10 chapters. And when I say read, that's a very loose term for what I did. I was like, first 5 sentences, got the gist, got it. That very long intro was to say The Wild Rose. There was so much of this novel. The smart thing to do would have been to write things down as I went. I did not do that. So we are going to get what we get. Because it's also been like a week and a book and a half later. We pick up with Willa and Seamus. Willa is living the solitary life in Africa, and she's like this enigma, this American who has achieved the impossible by like getting in with the locals, and she's the one that people call for when they come to Africa and they need a guide. So we open with her doing the dirty with some German guy who is in love with her. His name is Max. He becomes a bigger figure throughout this novel. He's also one of the many perspectives. There's at least 7 narrative points of view in this novel, and it is absurd. He did become one of my favorites because I thought he was more interesting. I was very disappointed by the end of the novel, but that's neither here nor there. That is a later problem. They're doing their thing and he's talking about how she's not very feminine because she's very thin. She admits she doesn't eat because if she doesn't eat, that means that her lady troubles will not trouble her, if you catch my drift. They go their separate ways and I'm just like, do I need to know that she makes love like a man? Because she's not very fleshy, nor is she very emotionally invested in him. And this is one of my main problems with her, is that Seamus is supposed to be her long lost love, like her one and only. And I guess that she's sleeping around to forget him. But it's not really to forget him because she admits she made a mistake. She admits she should have turned around the second she left, but she has too much pride to do that, and then it was just too late. Willa, I don't get you. I don't like you, and you're boring. She is still trying to do her climbing thing, but the prosthetic that these tribes people have made for her is very rudimentary, and it's just not doable. She's hanging out with the Dalai Lama because nobody can get in touch with her directly. But like the Dalai Lama is visiting and apparently they have this really great friendship, but because he's the Dalai Lama, he can't really show that he likes her and that he finds her intriguing because she's like a pagan white person. He tells her about this other explorer who wants to have her aid. She's like, all right. She goes back to her hut or whatever to find him on the verge of hypothermia. And I'm like, what is going on here? Because seriously, I thought you were in the desert. Whatever. Maybe she wasn't actually in the desert, but it did open up with her having meaningless intercourse with a German. Anyways, she gets this guy inside and she's like doing all of her voodoo to make sure he doesn't lose toes. And he thinks that she's coming on to him and she's like, hold up, wait a minute. Before he passes out, he's like, I've got letters for you. There's all this crap in between. But these letters tell her that her father is on his deathbed and that she needs to come home. I don't know why she hasn't gotten these letters. I mean, obviously, the mail system, not that reliable in the early 1900s. Oh, I know what it was. She's like, there's far too many letters here for me to have just not gotten them in a while. Something's wrong, and we know that it's about her dad because previously we had seen from Shamey's perspective that the dad had cancer and was not doing well, and that everybody had been trying to get in touch with her and nobody could, and blah, 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 blah. But to backtrack a little bit, we have Shamey. So Shamey is now this great explorer, and he has come to England. He has just gone on a once-in-a-lifetime, never done before exploration to the South Pole, and he's now in London, and he has all these things planned that he has to do, like talks and seminars and blah-de-blah-de-blah. He's offered a job, but she's like, I don't really know if I want to do that because that would tie me down. So while he's in town, he meets this woman named Jenny, because Fiona, because this is about the time of the suffrage movement, Fiona is 100% in on the suffrage movement, and she has been put in jail because of this protest that she was part of. Joe, who I skipped everything of him in this, essentially the first half of the novel, because it was all about politics and it's the lead up to World War I, and it was just plumb boring. He's in a meeting with somebody because he is an MP, which to me as an army brat is military police, but I think it's like, I don't know what MP stands for, but it is some British term for people who are in parliament. And so he is just trying to get funding and improving the lives of like street urchins, because that's where he and Fiona had started, and now they're like billionaires or whatever, but they're always trying to get back to their community. They're always trying to make their community better. His daughter Katie, who we had been introduced to in the first novel, she's now like 15 or 16, and I really didn't need Katie in a lot of reviews, which you guys were still really terrible about giving me details, okay? Like when I'm skipping things in a book this large, I need you to fill in my gaps. But Katie is like a feminist of her time, and she keeps getting kicked out of her boarding schools because she is too advanced and she wants to have a voice, and she keeps staging protests and unions, and she has her own newspaper, which might be okay, but not the kind of stuff she wants to write. She rushes into her dad's office. He's like, kid. Actually, he's not like kid. His secretary's like, kid, like you're not supposed to be in here. And he's like, hey, secretary, why is she in here? And she's like, oh, mom. So they go to the jail, and we start hearing how not all of the women are in the same place. And I'm like, so are we saying that Fiona is like a rebel without a cause, and so she and the biggest rebels without a cause are secreted away somewhere and being tortured? No. But we do at this point get a little insight into women's perils. So she comes out and she's all battered and she's all bruised. She's like, but I'm fine, I can't wait to do it again. And we meet a young woman named Jenny. So Jenny, I didn't need her. Like, I didn't need her perspective. I didn't mind what she added to Shamey, but I did not need her perspective. Anyways, so he, is still heartbroken over Willa, but he's like, this Jenny girl, she's kind of intriguing. They start courting or whatever. And Jenny is the daughter of a minister, which means she is pure as the driven snow until she meets Shamey. But Jenny has a deep, dark secret. Now here, she sleeps with Shamey. He notices this scarring on her abdomen. And we know the story she tells him that she had an incident with a carriage is not the entire truth. But the entire truth was, I didn't really tell you how I got into this incident with carriage, which was just being like a child and dumb. And what this impacts is I might not be able to have kids. Let's put it out there. I understand having kids in the early 1900s was a lot more important than it is now. Like, that was women's role. Women were not people. They were childbearers. They took care of their husbands. They took care of their homes. So I understand it was a point of pride, but I was like, that was your big secret, that your immaturity and lack of awareness caused you to be run over by a carriage, which then prevented you from possibly ever having children. I thought it was gonna be a lot bigger than that. Sure, it could end with I can't have children, but I thought the reasoning for the scarring was going to be something completely different than the half-truth she gave him. Anyways, what do you know? She ends up getting pregnant, which means that Shamey, who is convincing himself that he loves her, is like, you know what? Let me marry you. And we get into this whole backstory of all the ways she's been burned in the past because all these men, once they realize she can't have kids, are like, actually, let me go talk to that girl over there instead. Then we encounter a friend of hers / mentee. They're quoted as being like sisters. But this girl, Josie, was kind of a street urchin. And Jenny was part of this parish. Because she cannot rear children, it's recommended, hey, maybe you can just be a teacher. And so she'll take in the kids off the streets and she'll take care of them and she will teach them. And Josie was one of these students. I do not know at what age they encountered each other. At this point in time, however, Josie is a showgirl in the least flattering means of the word. And she is involved with the biggest, and this cracks me up. And it's just one of those things, like when I read Harry Potter the first time and they refers to somebody getting fired as getting sacked. To us, it's a facetious term, but to them, that is how they refer to someone as being fired. And here, and I guess in this period of time, bad guys, they are referred to as villains. And to me, a villain is like the guy with the mustache who's tying the girl to the train tracks is like, ha, ha, ha. You know, like, it's something that I can't quite take seriously. But Sid, back from The Winter Rose, he was the biggest villain of them all. He has since moved on, and he has now been replaced by Billy Madden. Billy Madden, he's married. He has a couple kids, but he's also a philanderer. And right now he's philandering with Josie. What do you know? Josie comes down pregnant, and he's like, you're not having this kid. And she's like, yes, I am. He beats her within an inch of her life, and she seeks sanctuary with Jenny. Jenny is like, don't really know what to do with you because I have no money myself, but what I'll do is my mom actually left me a cottage in the Cotswolds, so I'm gonna sneak you over there and I'll visit every couple weeks, every couple months, and we'll get pregnant together. And this is before she has married Shamey. And Josie's like, oh, you bad girl, you've been doing the dirty too. What do you think happens? First off, they get married. Second off, this is when Willa's dad dies. Third, Willa appears at the funeral and she's like, oh my gosh, love of my life is married. And then what would happen but Jenny loses the baby. And then this is something I called from a mile away, because she and Josie have had this discussion about What is Josie going to do with her child? So Jenny's like, you know what? I've got this doctor friend. I'm sure she can help us out. Well, what do you know? Jenny loses the baby and Josie is like, I guess I'll give her my baby. And so what they have done is when Jenny loses the baby, she's in the Cotswolds. They go to town and Josie says that Jenny is Josie and that she is Jenny. Josie has lost her baby. When Jenny has her baby, it now has Seamus and Jenny's names on the birth certificate, so everybody thinks this kid belongs to them. And Josie and Jenny look enough alike that even though this kid isn't going to look like Shamey, nobody's going to question the parentage because this kid will look like Jenny. The kid is born. It's a little boy. His name is Charles. Yes. James? Charles. There's a lot of kids. By that point, though, we are now entering World War I. So let me backtrack. Let's get back to Max. Max is a German spy. But before we actually know he's a German spy, we just know there's something wrong, like there's something off about him. He, as I mentioned, we have Ivy from the Winter Rose, and Ivy has a sister named Maud. Ivy had been disinherited because she just wanted to be a doctor, and her parents were like, absolutely, positively not. Maud still has her money. Eventually, Ivy gets her money too, but you gotta watch my other review to see how that happens. We re-encounter Maud. My impression, because like there's 8 million narrative perspectives in each of these books. And so by the time we finished with The Winter Rose, I was like, what's going on with Maud? She's such a big character, but where is she going? So Maud enters into a relationship with Max, and Max is over here, like he's not a diplomat per se, but he is part of, not the Admiralty, I don't even know what that is, but that is part of all of this. Anyways, but he's kind of a diplomat of sorts. So he's like sent over from Germany and he's supposed to be German relations and blah, blah, blah. Of course, by the time this World War I thing comes around, he has been a suspect of being a secret agent and feeding information to the Germans, but we don't really know what he's up to. All we know is he and Maud get into a relationship, whatever it is. But at the same time, he has started seeing this other woman named, I can never remember, Gladys Bigelow. Gladys is a mousy sort of lady. Our first encounter with her is Max is watching her get off of the train or the subway, something like that. I don't think the subway was actually around, the tram. And he is staging a situation in which they will run into each other. They do run into each other, and like Gladys she's just a big fat bore. So you want to know what's going on because we know his intentions are not good. We just don't know what they are. What it leads to is Gladys is the assistant, not to the prime minister, who at this point, it's not Winston Churchill. No, it's not Winston Churchill yet. But she is the secretary assistant to some big wig in Parliament. And what he wants is for her to steal military information and pass it along. He earns her trust, and then one night he gets her drunk, and she's real prim and proper. So I'm thinking, like, is something inappropriate going to happen here? Something that is not given permission going to happen here? No, what he does is he just strips her to the buff, and he takes raunchy pictures of her so that he can blackmail her into providing this information. Now we know why Germans are always a step ahead, which obviously this is fictionalized, but is based off of true events. So I thought it was pretty cool. Like, I wanted to know what was going on with Max, and like, even though he was devious and I hated him and he made me feel icky, it was really interesting. Yes, now back to Willa. Willa has come back for the funeral, and Jenny, by this point, has been visiting Josie more frequently. Hers and Shamey's relationship has begun to deteriorate. Obviously, he has forced himself to believe that he is in love with Jenny, and then Willa shows up and all that goes out the window. They're very standoffish with each other because they're both like, we can't do this. But then they start sleeping together, which causes Jenny to go to the Cotswolds more and more often. And then what happens, which by that point, Shamey had already enlisted in the Navy and he was off at sea. Josie's and her plan goes off without a hitch because Shamey would have caused a fuss, but he wasn't there to make a fuss. Shamey and Willa are having this affair. They're about to not really sail off into the sunset, but because Jenny is in the Cotswolds, they're going to spend an entire unadulterated week together. Willa, who has a very tumultuous relationship with her brother Albie, Albie, who is BFFs with Shamey, is like, hey, let's get together and talk. This conversation devolves real quickly because Max is everywhere. Max knows everything, which is what makes him a great German spy. He had seen Willa and Shamey coming in and out of the same places. He puts two and two together. So he lets Albie know, hey, your sister is sleeping with your best friend who is married to another woman. Albie confronts Willa. Willa's like, let me leave a Dear John note for Shamey and then I'm gonna leave. She goes to Cairo, so to Damascus. Yeah. Cairo, I believe. It doesn't really matter. She gets to a lot of different places. And what she does from there is she works under a male pseudonym so that she can continue to sell her pictures and get paid. And obviously it's a male-dominated society at this point. She goes on dangerous missions and she proves herself as one of the boys and blah, 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 blah. This is then where we start to experience Lawrence of Arabia, which I probably should have done some background research on this, but I didn't. In this world, she is accredited with creating the myth of Lawrence of Arabia because one of her very good male friends is a guy named Teddy Lawrence. When she's at the train station trying to figure out where to go, she runs into him and she's like, hey, can you please take me with you and get me a job? I wasn't paying the best of attention. So I don't really know why he was going there. It ended in some service to his country because lost my train of thought. Basically Germany and all of those countries were trying to take Damascus and the Middle East and all those kinds of places. And so Lawrence of Arabia was fighting to keep those principals free. Principals? I don't know, it's too late. This is not my best review. Now she's off and she's got an improved prosthesis and blah, 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 and she does her thing. But we then see Max, so Maud actually comes to where Max is staying. So he has two aliases. He has Max and then he has some other alias where he stays in a more dingy area of town and a more low rent kind of place, and he can meet with his other German cohorts and do whatever they do. The Allies have discovered some of his cohorts and they have followed them. Max, realizing what has happened, shoots them, starts burning some of their stuff, and he escapes. Now he has nobody to deliver all this information that Gladys has compiled for him. This is when he comes to Jenny and he says, that kid, not your kid. So I'm actually a double agent and all these papers that Gladys is going to bring you are like papers to help people get out of Germany. This is what you need to do. Somebody will come pick them up and then that somebody gets on a boat and delivers whatever it needs delivering to wherever it needs to be delivered. I think he has also threatened Willa. Anyways, Maud, she comes to where he's staying because she wants to surprise him with a trip. She is like, hey, I'm gonna put these tickets here, but I want to write a note. As she's trying to find a paper and a pen, she runs across Gladys's no-no pictures, and she starts putting things together, and she realizes that Max is a German spy. And I'm like, it's about freaking time. As intelligent and capable as Donnelly's characters are supposed to be, they're really dim-witted. Now, Maud is getting a storyline. Maud is doing something. Somebody is doing something. Somebody's figuring something out, because it's like all these characters are just twiddling their thumbs like, oh my gosh, how does Germany know all of our plans? Why is it that the bad guys, or the villains, are always so many steps ahead of the good guys? Even our smartest good guys can't outwit the bad guys. Why is it every single time? I just don't understand. And it's very frustrating. What should happen? But Max comes home. He realizes what she's done, but she thinks she's tricked him into thinking that she has no idea of anything and that he has just startled her. So what does he do? He drugs her, takes her to her apartment, and then he overdoses her with morphine. So she dies. Because of this, Ivy comes home from America. She brings her kids. Unfortunately, Sid cannot make it because it's too dangerous for him to come back to London. About this time is when the Spanish flu rears its head. So all of us, now that we've gone through COVID, we understand exactly what's happening. This then prevents Ivy from returning to California. Sid, wouldn't you know it, surprises her, and she's like, why are you here? But it could have been like a year or more before they'd see each other, just because of the nature of you can't go anywhere. And then with the war, it's dangerous to travel over the international waters. She had been able to sell Maud's townhome, but she could not sell Maud's estate out in the country. What she does, because she's a doctor, she decides to turn it into a hospital for wounded soldiers. I think it's more like mentally wounded, but I think they also are like physically wounded too. Here is when we see, which I was completely oblivious to, apparently Fiona and Joe's oldest son, he is Charlie. I think James is Jenny and Shamey's child. Charlie, because he's named after Sid, whose real name is Charlie, he has gone off to war, and he suffered a catastrophic incident. There was a shelling. He witnessed his friend get blown to bits, and this caused him to not be able to go back out into battle. So his master and commander has him tied to a tree until they decide to pull him down. And at that point, he is catatonic. He no longer can respond to the outside world. So now he's at this home, and his mother is devastated. Sid/Charlie seems to be very good with these emotionally and mentally damaged soldiers. He is on the forefront of horse therapy and knowing how to do alternative medicines and therapies to heal shell shock, PTSD, that kind of stuff. Now they have this hospital where everybody's working and living and playing. Shamey comes home. He then is about to ship out again when Willa, who is on like a super secret mission, her plane gets shot down and she is captured, not necessarily insurgents. I did not understand the terms of all of these Middle Eastern groups. So she and Lawrence of Arabia were allied with this one group. And people can turn on each other, and not all groups are created equal or like are aligned in their belief systems. So the pilot has his cut off, and she is captured by this other group, and they take her to a prison, and she is mistreated. I guess she's gross enough because of her missing leg and all kinds of other things. What is it? Malaria? She has contracted some kind of disease that she had previously saved. No. There's two things that she comes down with. The second one is what she had helped save another sheik's son from, which allies them and comes into play later in the book. But anyways, they're like, we're not touching this girl. Only to find out that Max is part of this insurgent group. He saves her, essentially, and he like brings her to the hospital. He has her nursed back to health, and he's still in love with her. And I'm just like, dude, whatever. Everybody still believes that Maud committed suicide, except for Ivy and Fiona. They're like, she never would have committed suicide. Like, she might have overdosed, but she was better. Like, she wasn't abusing substances anymore. So like, this doesn't align. But of course, they can't do anything because as intelligent and capable as they are, they're not intelligent and capable enough to solve the mystery and clear Maud's name. And you know, as much as I was like, Maud is kind of a throwaway, I was sad that she died. I thought we were going somewhere with her. Willa is being nursed back to health, and her plan of action is to let Max believe that she is falling in love with him, that she's going to spend the rest of her life with him, only to gain the upper hand, and she beats him, supposedly to death, with the butt of a pistol, and she escapes. But in the meantime, Shamie has caught wind of the fact that her plane has gone down and that she is missing. So he heads a rescue party, but he is on a timeline because he has to meet his ship so that he can ship out again. Shamie has gone off to the desert to try to find Willa. In the end, they are able to find her. She is near death. She is sick again, nursed back to health, and she feels like she has imagined Shamie. The next thing she knows is that Shamie's ship has gone down and he was not recovered. Backtrack a little bit. Jenny realizes the truth about Max and that he is not a double agent. He is just a German spy. He had instructed her never to open up these envelopes, but she decides, I'm going to open it up, and she learns the truth. She realizes that she's passing British intelligence on to the Germans. But before she can get this information to anybody, wouldn't you know it, she contracts Spanish influenza and dies. But before she dies, she's taken to the hospital, and I was just kind of like, how did she contract it and not pass it on? Because there's a bit of foreshadowing about quarantining and like, is everybody going to be okay? And of course, we want our main characters to be okay, but you know, if the writer is doing their due diligence, not everybody's going to survive, hence Fred Weasley's death in Harry Potter. But she's taken to the hospital, and when she comes to, she's trying to tell the nurses and the doctor, like, hey, I've got something that I need to pass on. They think she's delusional, which was very frustrating for me. I guess it is a sign of the times, and that's something that I have to adjust to when reading historical fiction, but I was just like, at some point, they're like, maybe she's not so delusional after all. They bring Jo in, and she finally gets this information across as to intelligence that the Germans have, hoping that it will prevent Shamie's ship from going down. They are unsuccessful. His ship goes down. Now everybody believes he's dead, and they're devastated. Meanwhile, two things. One, Billy Madden, he had his legitimate sons. He has no idea what happened to Josie. He has no idea what happened to their child, but he has vowed vengeance if he ever finds her. He is seen, actually, let's go a little bit before that. Sid, trying to figure out what actually happened to Maud, does one of the dumbest things ever. So what I could get from people's reviews is that they loved his scenes, which I agree. I thought they were very well done. They were a lot more interesting than a lot of other scenes. But he makes a really dumb decision to go back into the underworld, which then has him beaten by Billy's men and thrown into the river. Well, not thrown into the river, but then he's delivered to this riverboat captain, or boat captain, and who is then supposed to dispose of his body. This boat captain happens to be somebody that Sid, back in his villain days, had helped. So he and his wife are like, we are not gonna get rid of you. We're gonna nurse you back to health. But of course, Fiona and Ivy are like, oh my gosh, he's done. He's dead and gone. He reappears, but he has gotten information from this boat captain named John about Max's whole system. Max is believed to be dead. The papers have said he is dead. And so they're like, we have got to figure out this chain of command because somehow this information is still getting out there. He goes to Gladys's boss, who at this point Gladys has killed herself because even though Max is dead, she receives one of those dastardly pictures in the mail and she says, this is a warning. Her whole reasoning for going through with all of this was shame and pride, and she knew that if something happened to her, her mother would be put in a home and things would just go downhill from there for her mother. Here, she's like, you know what, the only thing I can do is kill us both. So she covers all the cracks, she turns on all the gas, and they die. Sid and Joe are meeting with her old boss, and these two are not coming to terms with things because they've always just been on opposite sides of the fence on things, and neither one will give. They eventually come to a compromise, and the plan is, even though Gladys is dead and Jenny is dead, they're like, hopefully this other guy has not come to pick up this envelope yet. So the plan is to lie in wait on this boat for this guy, and then they will reveal his dastardly deeds and everything will be okay, because it's not just about him. Like, they have got to figure out who's at the head of this. You know, you got to cut off the head of the snake. They get this guy on the boat, and Sid has told John, he's like, look, I know this could mean certain death for you because Billy will come after him. So he's like, I have a plan, and eventually you're going to end up in California. You can help me on my ranch. Everything will be okay for you. And I guess in the end, everything is, because we never hear from this dude again. He delivers Sid and the gang to one of Joe's ports. When they get there, Scotland Yard shows up, and they're like, he is delivering goods or whatever, and they're like, oh, absolutely not, like, he's actually a German spy. Scotland Yard is like, well, who are you? And they're like, this is who we are. And they're like, yeah, well, we're not going to listen to you. In the end, it turns out that the delivery guy had gems on him, even though he had the same envelope that they had gotten from Jenny. At this point, we're like, you know, Max must not be dead. There's somebody still controlling things, and they set this whole thing up. Somehow they get out of trouble. I don't know, because I skipped or I was asleep. It doesn't really matter. Willa is in Paris at this point, and she's besties with Josie. This is that moment where she's just this great photographer, and she's doing all this kind, and like, she's in this loveless, well, for her, it's a loveless relationship. The guy is like, hey, let's get married. And she's like, sure. And I'm waiting for some kind of a resolution with Willa and Shamey. They're having all these near misses. They have is such, okay, like, I guess I just don't like tropes. And I really hate this whole, like, we do, we don't, we do, we don't, like, it's never gonna work, but I'm still in love with him. And so with Shamey, I was excited when he met Jenny, because she seemed to be somebody that he could move on with. And then it's like Donnelly lost steam and was like, I'm just not going to pursue this and expand this in a way that could be meaningful. So I'm just going to bring Willa back in, and Jenny and Shamey are going to fall apart. She tells the guy, yeah, I'll marry you. And I'm like, hey, you know what? Maybe Shamey really is dead. No, he's not. As for Willa, her aunt comes to see her and is like, I need to take you back home with me. You are just not well. Willa, for one reason or another, goes to visit Josie and finds Josie beaten nearly to death again. Josie tells her that the guys were trying to find some information because when Billy Madden learned that because Max had pretended just to be this British guy who was like fencing stolen stuff and sending them on through Billy's men. When he learns that Max is actually German, he's like, that guy lied to my face. I'm gonna go take care of what I need to take care of. So he and his best man go, and their intent is to kill Max, but Max is great at self-preservation, and he's like, actually, your sons are not all completely gone, because 2 had died in the war, and then the 3rd was in the mental hospital. He had been shot in the head, so he was never recovering. He had encountered James because he had gone to visit that one son at the hospital, and they'd seen him through the window, and they're like, that can't possibly be Billy Madden, the Billy Madden. James goes out being a 5-year-old or whatever that he is, and is like, here's a cookie, feel better. And he's like, holy cow, are you whatever, my son's name is William? Max is like, remember Josie? She had your kid. And he's still around here, but you know what? I'm smart enough not to give you this information, because as soon as I give you this information, you're gonna kill me. So now Billy is on the war path, and he is gonna go after Shamey, because that's what his men came after Josie for. Somehow they figure out where she is after like 5 or 6 years. They don't get the information out of her, but I guess somehow they do coerce Max into taking them where they need to be. Willa is trying to call anybody and everybody to try to save Shamey, and everybody's like, you're just a mad woman. We're not going to listen to you. She does everything she can to get out to the Cotswolds, because that is where Shamey has relocated to. In the meantime, her brother, who did not believe her when she called him on the phone, was like, maybe I'll just like go to check things out. So she is there with Shamey, and she's like, you're in mortal peril. Something, I don't know exactly what happened with the kid. I guess they tell him to go hide. It was kind of confusing for me. Billy knocks down the door, beats them up, and he's like, where's the kid? He is going to take them to the river and stage their deaths. And he's going to take his kid back home. And like, there's all these different stories about where this kid is. I guess the reality is he had been hiding in his room. He had escaped through the window, and Billy's henchman had not grabbed him, which that's what he told Shamey, was that the kid was in the car with his henchman, but he'd actually like gotten out to the road, and this is where Albie came across him and brought him with him. Billy is about to kill Willa and Shamey when Max shoots him in the head. And here's when he reveals that he's actually a double agent. It was weak, in my opinion, and then Max sails off into the sunset. I was like, you're gonna drop that bomb on us and then drive away? He was so untrustworthy throughout the entire novel, which is great. I loved the second guessing, but we got no real resolution, because he was so good at saving his own skin that I was like, you know, this could just be another instance where he's just trying to save his own skin, and he's actually a German spy. That's it. Shamey, he is like, Willa, marry me, and she says, okay. And then Shamey's like, I really hate living in the Cotswolds. Let's go somewhere else. They go to Africa, and they're like in the shadow of Mount Kilimanjaro, and even though James does not call her mom, like, we're on the road to that, and you know, they're happily ever after. Ivy and Sid go back to America. Charles has begun to recover. And that's it. It was a painful book. I do not recommend it. From what I read of others' reviews, they felt the same way. They were detached from Willa and Shamey. They didn't necessarily say there was too much going on, but not everybody is as articulate as I am. And when I say articulate, I mean long-winded. The gist was the main characters were not worth rooting for, and so it was hard for them to be invested in this novel. It's a very well-written book, a very well-researched book, but it was far too long. It had too many plots and subplots, too many narrative points of view, and we just got lost in everything. If you need a good bedtime story, something to put you to sleep, go for it. Bye.